Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and welcome to the next episode of the Resto-Mod Mini build. On this episode, we are going to start diving into taking some of the engine apart. This is going to get repainted, and I'm going to give you guys a little update on the shell so you know what's going on there. So stay tuned for that. Now this is the next episode in the long-running series, the Resto-Mod Mini. I have been informed that there are quite a few Resto-Mod Minis on the YouTube Miniverse right now. I did not realize that when I named this build, but whatever, we're gonna roll with it. On the last episode, I covered how and what we are gonna be doing in terms of the ECU. That is a Nexus R3 from Haltech and a PD16 for power distribution. If you want to learn more about that and the plans that I have for this car, head over to the link in the kind of corner of this video. But this video is going to be more focused on the A-Series engine itself. Now, I am not going to be changing a ton about the engine, transmission, anything like that, as the setup that I have right now is pretty perfect for the build that I am targeting and the power output that I already succeeded in achieving and would like to maintain in the new engine. The major things that are actually going to be changed in relation to this engine are the turbo exhaust manifold, downpipe, and the turbo itself. I'm going to a slightly different turbo, which I'll talk about more in the future. And of course, I mentioned in the last video that I'm moving to drive-by-wire, which means no more throttle cable and a ton of really cool electronic controls on my engine in relation to my fuel-injected setup. Now, the other thing that I am going to be changing is my clutch setup. The clutch that I had on the car already was an RTS, that is a twin spring clutch. And this was made by a gentleman on Instagram called Turbo Mark 1 Mini. I think he changed his name to Turbo Mark 1 Golf. Now, I am going to be changing this out for a slightly different RTS clutch setup. The clutch that he built for me holds a ton of torque, but as a result, the pedal feel is extremely strong. I mean, extremely strong. I drove this all over the North Carolina mountains and everything, and by the end, my knee on my left side was basically just totally buffed up. I have like a lopsided leg now, and it's perfect for the power output that I have on this engine, but I want something that's a little bit more comfortable on my kind of daily driving, as this setup is really focused on what we have been calling the Restomod build, and that is to improve the Mini, make it more drivable, more comfortable on the road, while also staying true to some of its roots. Now, I am still going to be getting a RTS clutch. I'm gonna maintain the kind of setup that I have with this clutch, but I'm getting another one made by Paul over at HRE IRL. And I'm working with him to build the exact clutch that I want. I'm gonna have a sprung disc inside. We're gonna experiment with that and see how it does with this RTS setup. And then we are also doing a slightly different setup with the flywheel, blah, blah, blah. We'll get to that in the future. That is currently being made, and when we get to installing that, I'll go over the differences. Now, hopping over to the engine, we have kind of a pseudo disassembled engine. The clutch is obviously out. I was holding it just a minute ago, and some of the ancillary items on the timing side have been removed. And what we're gonna be doing in this episode is removing a little bit more of the external stuff, because I am gonna be repainting this block something different. Haven't quite decided on the paint yet. And I am going to be changing out my timing system here for a belt drive system, which I'm hoping to do in this episode, assuming those parts arrive. But in the meantime, I'll go ahead and start disassembling that stuff. Now, I also kind of want to take the head off, even though I don't necessarily need to. I want to take a look at the head gasket. I want to look at the pistons. The engine is out, so I might as well do a little looky-looky to see if anything has broken down or had any problems while I was driving it before. I'm reasonably confident that it hasn't, but it's always good to check these things when you have the opportunity. Now you guys have seen me take apart engines, you've seen me build engines before, so I'm not going to focus too much on the how-to on disassembly. I've got plenty of other videos on that, but I do want to focus a little bit on the two items that we're going to be changing out in this build and kind of talk about those in more detail. All right, so next up, we are going to be removing the timing system on this engine. Now, the timing system that I have on here is an all MED setup. That's MED engineering. I have their timing gears, I have their timing cover, their timing plate, all of that here, which is adjustable to allow you to degree your cam a certain amount. I am going to be removing this for a few reasons and replacing it with a CAD belt drive system. The belt drive system that CAD makes is really cool. It's an externally mounted belt. One of the reasons I hadn't moved to a belt system before is they do require more frequent service, and as a result, if this is covered, if the belt itself is covered, it makes it much harder to replace that belt with the engine in place. So my goal is to quiet down the timing system, which a belt drive will do, but also I wanted to be able to service it pretty easily. Now, some folks might be asking, well, why are you getting rid of this MED setup that's a nice aftermarket setup, which you installed however long ago? And you'd be right, it is that the timing cover and plate are really nice. The timing gear, I must say that I was not very pleased with. Installation of it has a lot of nuance that they don't include anything in their documentation about how to do it correctly, so you have to contact them. And Steven over at MED is an absolutely wonderful guy. He's very, very helpful. But for example, the gear that goes on your crankshaft has to be linished in order to fit on the nose of the crank that you have. And they say they do that because the classic mini cranks are all kind of like hit or miss with the sizing of this end here. But the reality of that is that no other manufacturer requires you to do that. And from my perspective, it feels a little lazy. The other manufacturers all seem to be able to work within the different tolerances of the Mini without any sort of special machining required for that gear. Then on top of that, one of the engines that I've built, and I have other folks that have had similar issues with this timing gear setup, I had a timing gear completely fail on the A-series that I built for my buddy Kenny. He had that orange Mini that you might remember on videos past. But the bolts, I really believe, had a material failure. Maybe the manufacturer, the source that they got their bolts from, had a bad batch. And as a result, one of the bolts kind of worked its way out, despite being Loctited, as I mentioned before, and caused a catastrophic failure of his timing system. We're very, very lucky it didn't demolish the rest of his engine. But regardless, MED did not want to provide any sort of refund or anything like that, aside from discounts on future parts, which, you know, not really what I needed at the time. Either way, it shook my confidence in this timing system. So if you want to move to like a duplex timing gear or something similar, something aftermarket where you can adjust it, I probably would not get the MED one. They have a ton of exceptional parts, but I don't trust this anymore. It's actually been something that's been in the back of my mind since that happened on the other engine that I built. with so much power in this engine, I was just, it felt like a weak point to me. So that's kind of like the long story of why I'm going to be replacing and getting rid of that timing gear. But if you are going to get a duplex timing gear, SwiftTune makes a really, really nice one. It bolts right up and works the exact same way. They have a few different combinations as well. A lightweight alloy one, a mixed metals one, and then I think a standard steel one. But all to say that they have some great options. One of the other reasons that I am replacing this stuff, specifically the way that this outer timing system works, this seal right here, I have tried every single trick in the book where you leave these loose and you centralize the seal on your pulley and then you tighten it down. And you know, I've tried new seals, I've tried special tricks with the seals, and I can tell you with confidence that this seal, it always leaks, period. I have never had an engine that doesn't leak around the seal, and super frustrating. But I'm hoping that the belt drive system uses, since it uses only one seal and it's right up against the engine, I'm hoping that it helps seal that and make it even more leak proof. Granted, this is a Mini, you know, it's no illusion there that this is never going to leak, but hopefully that provides me a little bit more. I will say, I'll give them credit, there was no failure, and getting in here, all these bolts appear to be tight still, so maybe it was just a fluke with that one I used, and then the other folks that have had that same issue. But these gears are going to come off, and then the timing cover is going to come off. As you can see, I went ahead and flipped the engine upside down. The reason I do this and the reason I did this is because the lifters inside the engine, if you take your camshaft out while it's upright, those lifters are just going to fall down into the gearbox, which on this engine and my setup I am ultimately going to be removing, again, because of some of the other things that we'll be updating. But while the engine is still together, I don't want those things to fall out. So upside down engine it is. Now what we're going to do is disconnect this nut right here, which is on the camshaft, and then get these two gears off. And then of course the whole timing plate off as well. All right, so that is basically what I'm talking about here. The inside of this gear was linished to match the thickness of this end of the crankshaft, yet still it required me to use a bearing puller to pull this off. And frankly, if you have a timing system, it should not be that difficult to get that gear on and off. You kind of saw the one that goes on the crank was actually near perfect, so credit where it's due there. But I mean, it's not really acceptable to me. So check this out, it's actually pretty crazy. The camshaft is so new that the only parts that are really worn in are the actual lobes. The rest is still got even the protective coating on it. That's how little this engine's been run. But the camshaft otherwise looks really good. The bearings are good looking. Everything looks pretty happy. So that's good. Now we just need to get this timing cover off. Alrighty, so that is going to wrap up this episode of Classic Mini DIY. I wanted to get the engine split apart so I could start cleaning it and prepping it for paint and all sorts of other stuff, but we're still waiting on some parts, so I don't think I can move too much farther forward on the engine side of things. Now, as you can see behind me, the shell is back again from the sandblaster. It went twice. The first time to do the outside, second time to do the inside after I got the sound deadening removed, which was a whole ordeal. As you can imagine, that's kind of difficult. But the interior has an etch primer on it. It's been cleaned. There's no more tar-based sound deadening in there. And what we need to do next is do a little bit of welding. I'm hoping to bring that up to my buddy's house this weekend and knock that out. It shouldn't take too long from what he's telling me. And it's a little bit easier to do it that way than for me to buy a welder right now. So once we get that knocked out, we'll move on to things like Raptor liner on the inside, underside, trunk, and a few other places inside the car, which is going to be color matched to willow green. And then we'll be able to get the car off to paint and body to do the rest of the pretty outside stuff. So lots in store, lots left to do. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you have any questions about what we did on the episode, feel free to post those in the comment section below. But until I see you on the next one, you know the drill. Enjoy those minis and motor on. See ya.